We're joined by AfriForum's campaign manager, Jacques Broodryk, to tell us more about this. Jacques, good morning. Thanks for speaking to us here on Morning Live.
Good morning, and good morning to your viewers.
So, Jacques, you were responsible for actually developing that particular documentary. So let's just start by looking at what you found and what you thought was most worrying there.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of aspects that are shocking regarding our border control. But I think the scariest thing is just how blatantly it's taking place. If you know where to drive to the right spots, you can go and stand there during the middle of the day and watch these things happening. As we saw in the documentary as well, people are crossing the country willy-nilly without being stopped. And that's not even one of the biggest concerns. One of the bigger concerns are, of course, the illegal trade that's happening. We have contraband that's coming into the country, not just illegal products, but also very dangerous products, things like firearms and explosives. And there just doesn't seem to be any political will to bring an end to this.
So speaking of political will, some would say this is, of course, the terrain of government. Government needs to be the ones who are patrolling, making sure that none of that happens. So what exactly is your motivation as AfriForum behind establishing this initiative?
Well, our motivation is that there are a lot of things that government are supposed to be doing, but simply are not doing. And I think every South African is aware of those failures. But the problem is we can't just sit around and point fingers at government the whole day long. That's not going to bring any probable resolutions to the table. So AfriForum has more than 150 neighbour watch civilian safety structures countrywide. We have that for many years, and then we've had one in Messina for many years, and they have been actively involved in securing the border area there with the assistance of law enforcement. And we just wanted to bring their efforts to light to show what these guys as volunteers, everyday guys, go through to try and secure a border where there's absolutely no control. And from that, we just received such immense positive feedback from the public that we realized that this is an issue that needs to be addressed much broader. And from there on, that's where we launched the Border Watch initiative.
So you say, these are open borders, as your documentary is entitled, but also you just mentioned that there seem to be absolutely no controls. But we know that government actually does have law enforcement officials by way of South African police services and members of the South African National Defence Force who should be patrolling there. When you say there's absolutely nothing, are you saying that government's initiatives in terms of having people patrolling the borders are not there or are failing?
No, they are there, but they are definitely not succeeding. I think one of the biggest problems we face there is that, first of all, the amount of soldiers and police deployed there are just overwhelmed. There are way too little of them to police that entire area. And secondly, we see that there's no political will. Even the soldiers and the police on the ground who are really trying to do their jobs keep on running into walls because there's all kinds of political interference there. On top of that, then you also unfortunately have some rotten apples in the when it comes to law enforcement, who are involved in the smuggling and involved in the human trafficking. So from government side, they're definitely not doing what they're supposed to be doing.
So in terms of political interference, what exactly are you referring to, Jacques?
Well, I'm not going to get into certain details for security reasons, but there are people who have been involved in certain operations, and been told to stop it. Who've received instructions from high up that they should rather let those people be. So it's I can't tell you who's involved there, but there's clearly some people with authority who do have an interest in some of these things.
People with authority, but were these instructions issued in an official capacity, or were these people acting in their personal capacity?
I can't tell you. I didn't receive that instruction. It was conveyed to us via someone else. So I can't tell you whether it was an official instruction or someone in an influential position acting in a personal capacity.
Have you taken it up, though, with other authorities within government? And just what sort of cooperation has there been between yourselves and government on this initiative?
With our neighbourhood watches countrywide, on the ground level, there's great cooperation with police and law enforcement. They appreciate the fact that these guys are willing to back them up and willing to play a role where they often don't have the resources or the manpower, and there's a great working relationship. Sometimes high up, when it gets to the political level, we don't get along that well often. There are some politicians who don't like AfriForum being involved with civilian safety structures. But on the ground level, there's really great cooperation. People understand that there are things that need to get done, there's work that needs to get done, and there's no point in just sitting around and hoping it's going to come right by itself.
So, with that said, just talk us through, Jacques, when these patrollers go out, if they come across some illegal activity, what is their course of action at that point?
So maybe I should just first add that all of our patrollers are well trained. They're trained in the legal aspects of performing their duties, as well as the legal requirements for getting involved in situations like that. And they're also trained tactically in order to be able to protect themselves if necessary. So what they would do is they would first shout a command for the smugglers to stop. This is when they encounter them on private property in the middle of the night carrying their loot. That issue would be repeated 3 times, and there are many cases then the smugglers will drop their loot and start running. But there have also been cases where they've opened fire on our patrollers. So it's a very they're putting themselves in, and I think the important thing to remember here is that these guys are volunteers. They're not security guards. They're not military. They are volunteers who have been trained and are now taking these risks to try and secure the country.
So you spoke earlier on about contraband and illicit goods that are being trafficked between the two borders. Can you tell us the sort of contraband that your patrollers have come across?
The biggest thing that our patrollers seem to get hold of is illegal cigarettes. These can come through in massive amounts, of up to 80 people a night, or in one group, carrying bags and bags of cigarettes on their backs. To give you an idea, our neighborhood watch managed, with the support of law enforcement, last year between June and September alone, they managed to seize more than 12 million rands worth of contraband. So cigarettes is one of the biggest things, but obviously then also other things come through there, such as explosives that are used in cash and transit robberies and ATM bombings. Firearms come through there that's used to smuggle for human trafficking purpose. And we've also had incidences of rhino horn being smuggled through there.
So in some of these instances, for example, where explosives are the loot of the day, have your patrollers come across these and confiscated any of it at any point, Jacques?
So what our patrollers do is if they come across anything, they will secure it, and then they would immediately radio in. If the military or some other form of law enforcement is not on the ground with them, which is usually the case, but not always, then they would immediately radio in the nearest law enforcement to come and take over the scene, seeing as it's not their jurisdiction, and we try to do things by the book. So they would bring an end to the smuggling, secure the loot, and then they get the authorities in to further secure it and to transport it to wherever it needs to go.
So this, of course, episode focused on the Musina border post at Broodryk, but
yes,
you did indicate that you will be looking at other border posts as well.
Yes, so we, like I mentioned earlier, we have more than 150 community safety structures, farm structures and neighbour watches countrywide. So many of those neighbourhood watches do fall in border areas. And now with the great response that we've had since we started this initiative, we've been contacted by individuals and by private companies to ask how they can assist, how they can help us strengthen our efforts. And we're definitely going to use the resources that we managed to obtain through that to strengthen our patrols and our farm and neighbourhood watches in other border areas as well. We know, like, for instance, in Komati, the Komati Port area, there's a massive problem with vehicles being stolen and smuggled across that border. If you look at the Free State border with Lesotho, for instance, we know cattle theft is a major problem there. So all of our border areas do have specific challenges, and they need to be addressed.
So, notwithstanding what you've told us previously, if you talk about strengthening and supporting those patrollers, as those numbers grow, as they swell, do you not think it's important, Jacques, that you actually do find common ground with government on this particular matter?
AfriForum is always open for discussion with government. We're always open to sit around a table and to see how we can find mutual solutions. The problem, unfortunately, is I think it's very clear that there isn't a real commitment from government side to resolve this issue. Even when we see them building a new fence, they spend 40 million rand on literally, as the critics fairly call, a washing line. I've seen that fence with my own eyes. I can't understand why it could have cost 40 million rand. So that's unfortunately the problem we have. I think it will be difficult for anybody to put their faith and their trust in government to honestly resolve this problem if we look at the actions that they've been taking to apparently resolve this problem. But from our side, we're always open for discussion.
Right. Jacques, where to from here for you guys? Because, I watched that documentary and, as you say, that fence, seeing it up close and seeing what it actually really was, it really does leave a bitter taste in the mouth. But what's next for you?
Well, next up, we're going to be filming a second installment of Open Borders, which will be focused on one of the other border areas. For security reasons, I can't reveal which area and when exactly, but that'll be our next step. And then we're in discussion with various role players who have contacted us to see how they can support us. And once more of those agreements have been formalized, then we'll make a new announcement regarding that as well.
Well, we'll leave it there. Jacques Broodryk, thanks so much for speaking to us this morning. And Jacques is, of course, with AfriForum, and he's the campaign manager there, talking about that documentary that they did. It's called Open Borders, and it actually is filmed along the Limpopo River, where the border post is between South Africa and Zimbabwe. And quite interesting there, you have full-on trade. You have traders there on the border post who are literally selling refreshments, because this is something that happens every day like clockwork, and the authorities know about it, but it still goes on.